Hello. Welcome to another destroyer inspection in World of Warships. And we are looking at the Albarico de Barbiano. The lil pisser. The lil sap pisser, we might call it. My god, dude. Should you get the Barbiano for steel? That's really all that matters. Fuck no. This boat is dog shit. It's pretty funny, though. It's undeniably a silly, goofy little thing of a boat. Um, why is the Barbiano like basically dog shit? Well, actually, the Barbiano really is just a ship that's balanced, but because it's a balanced gunboat, it feels like dog shit. And the problem with Barbiano, the reason why it feels like dog shit, is mostly because its downsides are the kind of downsides that really grief the player who's playing the Barbiano. And basically, Barbiano has two downsides. One is it doesn't do any damage to people who aren't dog shit at the game. And two, it's very, very team reliant. Very possibly the actual most team reliant destroyer in the game that I can think of, and certainly the most team reliant gunboat in the game. Now, the problem with the Barbiano is, well, before we talk about the problem, we can talk about what's good about it. It has diabolical DPM. Okay, let's get that out of the way right now. What is special about Barbiano? It has the highest DPM in the game of any destroyer. Full stop. The theoretical DPM is, with a moderately reasonable build, like reload mod plus maybe a little bit of stuff on top. You're over 700,000 SAP DPM. Now, in theory, okay? In theory, you're over 700,000 SAP DPM. And a bit of that DPM is, as you can see here, going the Halford's way. And there's basically no DD in the game that would do that damage to him in that short of time. Except Alvaro de Bazan, of course, would have done the same. But, obviously Alvaro just does it once, and then he could theoretically get away. Whereas if we had vision on him for another 10 seconds, he would have died. So, Barbiano does, in fact, have the highest theoretical DPM in the entire game of any destroyer, full stop, and actually by quite a large margin. Like I said, theoretically, you can have over 700,000 SAP DPM. Now, we always, of course, need to think about theoretical versus effective DPM. The effective DPM is obviously way, 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 way lower than that. In reality, it feels lower than a ship like Rigolo that on paper has about half the DPM. And so number one big problem with Barbiano is you have to have teammate spawning. Like, you literally have to have teammate spawning because you see the kind of damage that the ship takes when playing at moderate range. Now, you can open water gunboat in Barbiano with the speed boost up. You got okay speed. Now, of course, for your size, your speed is really bad. But you go high 40s knots with the speed boost up. Of course, given how big your boat is, you're still insanely easy to hit, even with speed boost up. So you can open water farm in Barbiano a bit, but you've got to be really, really, really far away, or just farming a guy who, like, effectively can't afford to even deal with you. The boat does not survive long range, it does not survive long-term open water really at all. Against anyone with hands, they are going to nuke this thing on cooldown. Now, so basically what happens in the Barbiano is there are the odd unicorn games where you get to farm open water and you get to get a lot of damage without your smoke. However, in most Barbiano games, you kind of have to get your damage from the smoke. And the main reason for that is your shell arcs aren't very good. And so if you're going to farm at the range where you are hard to hit, you basically don't hit anything aside from like really slow giant BBs that either have massive superstructures or like 32 mil plated BBs where you can kind of pen them everywhere. So yeah, you either have to farm open water at such a long enough range that you don't really do effective damage, or you farm open water close enough that you get fisted by every BB and cruiser that shoots back at you. Now, of course, then what happens is you decide, well, okay, I need to use my smoke because I lose a lot of HP when I'm open water. and, you know, now I'm going to either burn HP early or later, and either way I need to get most of my damage from my smoke. Well, then, of course, the problem is you have to have teammate spotting, right? Now, this isn't necessarily unique to Barbiano. You could, of course, make a strong case that in order to use the guns to farm with Regolo, you need to have teammate spotting in your smoke. Of course, that's not really actually true, because Regolo with speed boost up goes like insanely faster than Barbiano, right? You know, in the mid 50s rather than the high 40s. It's also harder to hit straight up than Barbiano because it's smaller. So you kind of get shoehorned into this issue. Like I said, again, there are unicorn games where you get to farm open water at medium range and farm diabolical amounts of damage. They're pretty rare. On average, what you really need in Barbiano is you have to have permanent spotting on the ships. Every time you smoke, you have to have permanent spotting for yourself. If you don't have the permanent spotting for yourself, you aren't going to get any damage. As you can see there with the Bourgogne, with the Willem de Ursta, we could have farmed a truly obscene amount of damage. I mean, easily you can farm like 50k per smokescreen in Barbiano under ideal circumstances, and those were ideal circumstances, right? 32mm plated BBs at close range, so we hit all of our shells and we pen them everywhere. We could have had an absolutely disgusting amount of damage with that smokescreen, but of course, the spotting gets griefed, your damage gets griefed. You're very, very, very team reliant for that reason. Now, of course, you also have 0 torpedoes, so you don't really have any turn the tide sort of game impact. And, you know, obviously, you know, I'd say things like this ship has no game impact, right? Now, obviously, that's not, you know, we can read between the lines, right? You know, you're super easy to hit at 10 km. Like, no BB's not fisting this thing at 10 km, right? And what I mean when I say a ship doesn't really have any game impact is it doesn't really have the ability to change the course of the game once the game gets off course. If your team is in the middle of a throw, ships like Barbiano are just almost never going to change that throw into a win, because they don't have any kind of X factor ability. They don't have dev strike potential, right? They don't even have mediocre torps. Even the torps found on a ship like Regolo on Z52, right? These are torps that are good enough to potentially change the outcome of a game. And Barbiano just doesn't have any torps. Now, there's other DDs, right, that don't really have any torps, like Druid. You know, you could argue Sherman and Hull don't really have torps, although they kind of do, and they in fact hit a decent amount, usually at least 1 per game. And then Ragnar, of course, doesn't have any torps. But the thing is, none of these boats, well, especially in the case of Ragnar and Hull, they don't need team spotting. So those ships are inherently less team reliant than a ship like Barbiano. You know, imagine if your Hull could really only afford to shoot its guns when it was in a fuel smoke, right? I mean, imagine if your Ragnar had no radar and you know, couldn't really afford to shoot while detected. I mean, that's kind of the experience playing Barbion. I mean, you see, like, basically every time this game we're trying to position to get meaningful damage, the spotting is just being griefed, and it's being griefed, and it's being griefed, and it's being griefed, and it's being griefed. And that's why, you know, if you're a solo randoms player mostly, and of course, you know, like always, we're looking at 2 back-to-back solo randoms games, you just can't really, in good conscience, I don't think, ever recommend anyone buys this ship, because it is insanely good in a division with another destroyer, like, just truly incredibly good. You know, I was playing with Danny in the Radar Yu Yang, and, like, in those games, you know, we're averaging like close to 200,000 damage. In solo games, that number starts to drop off a cliff. The inability to start fires is something that people will often just completely overlook. You see here again, I mean, like, we're Bourgogne's in our mouth, we have to smoke, we want to shoot, but okay, yet again, we cannot shoot, right? Because nothing can spot him. And that's just kind of how it goes. And the problem with Barbiano is you have zero, and literally zero. You have literally zero way of impacting the game without being spotted, and when you don't have spotting for you, right? If that makes sense. Like, you don't have any ability to get damage without relying on a teammate to spot the damage for you or without risking your boat. And the problem is that the HP pool, I talked about this when we were discussing Laffy the other day. Some ships have assets and some ships have, copium assets basically. And the HP pool on the Barbiano is like thoroughly a copium asset. Like Barbiano is not remotely survivable because of its HP pool. There are destroyers with half the health that take longer to kill. I mean, legitimately, a no survivability expert Jaeger, for example, will require more shells to kill than a Barbiano will, right? Just because of how big Barbiano is. The speed boost, right? You've got this like theoretically great speed boost, but it's barely enough to make you survivable. I mean, at 12 kilometers, like I cannot afford to shoot at this board straight up. Like he'll take 2 or 3 shells to kill us, but you cannot afford to open up at this kind of range. Even like there's no missing this boat at this kind of range. Whereas if I'm Regolo on this kind of HP pool, I'm not like super worried about shooting like once and dodging one Bourgogne salvo because I know for a fact he'll never hit me, right? So it's not that the boat is inherently bad. It's that its downsides really grief you. It's very, very, very aggravating in most games to play solo. Because in order for you to get game impact in Barbiano, you require at all times one teammate to be doing something useful. And, guys, the harsh reality is, like, this is random battles. I mean, like, you see here what just happened. Our Tromp is here, and the Bourgogne is here. And our Tromp bespoke, custom, 17 generations of in-family artisanal craftsmanship levels griefs the spotting on Bourgogne. Not only do we not get to damage Bourgogne, but now the Fletcher's gonna die because he griefed the spot. And this is... Dude, I'm literally just getting fucking tilted even watching this replay back. Like, this is the Barbiano experience, is you get griefed by your team and you can't recover. Like, you cannot deal with being team griefed in this boat. You don't have the tools to impact the game when your team is incredibly dog shit, right? We always talk about, a lot of the time, how, like, World of Warships, typically speaking, there's 3 kinds of games, and they're roughly evenly split, right? About a third of your games are unwinnable no matter how good of a player you are. You could get 300,000 damage and 7 kills and lose the game. That's about a quarter to a third of your games are physically impossible for you to win. And about a third to a quarter of your games are physically impossible to lose. You could autopilot to A5 at the start of the game, die in the first 10 seconds, and your team's going to win. You're going to have like a 30-plus win rate playing that way. That's just the nature of the game, right? And then there's about 30 to 50% of your games where what you do matters, right? Maybe you could put in a Herculean, the kind of games where you might have put in a great performance, but man, if you had just done that little bit extra, you maybe could have won, right? And then we also have this concept, known as, the enemy team often turbo throws, and that's when a game that should be impossible to win is winnable because the enemy team throws. And one of Barbiano's biggest issues for me, and why it's like a very almost impossible ship to carry games in, is it's very, very, very poor at exploiting enemy mistakes. It's very, very poor at it. The only kind of mistakes you can really ever exploit in Barbiano are like DDs randomly running into you around islands, shit like that. Yeah, those mistakes can be exploited, but it's very, very hard. I mean, like this is a perfect example, right? This was one of the games where, like, if I had suicided early, our bungo couldn't have carried, right? Our bungo carried, but if we had died early and didn't contribute 150k damage, our team likely has a good chance of losing, right? This is kind of one of those middle of the pack 50% games where our contribution is kind of sealing the deal. We're not carrying, we're not putting in a stellar performance. We're just we're preventing our own team from throwing, right? And Barbiano can do that. Barbiano can chip away at the enemy team, farm a decent amount of damage, and guarantee that you aren't the reason for the loss, right? You won't be the reason your team lost. However, when the tide of the game turns, for example, if this Bungo who puts in this stellar performance dies slightly earlier, maybe he only gets 2k base and 3 kills. Do we have the tools to deal with that full HP Willem? Because he basically full to zero that guy. Do we have the tools to deal with that Valparaiso? Because the Bungo basically killed him by himself. And the answer is no. We don't have really any ability in Barbiano to turn the tide of the game, right? You don't really have any ability to do that. You can, it's an AFK farmer, in many ways. AFK farming, like we say all the time, can be a unicum win rate if you're a good player, right? If you're a decent player and you just stay alive and farm decent damage, you'll probably have a good win rate in any ship. But it's those games where they're hanging on like a knife's edge of your team could easily throw this game, right? One guy made a bad mistake and now the enemy team gained an advantage. We lost our destroyers, so there's no more spotting. What do? The answer is nothing. You don't do anything in Barbiano in those situations. And if any of you guys were here for the Zero Hot Takes Destroyer tier list, you'll know that part of what turns me off from many ships is if it requires the enemy player that you're fighting to be bad. And I think probably one of like the worst things about Barbiano, one of the worst feelings when you play it is when you realize that the enemy team or just the enemy player, maybe it's a whole division of 3 guys, aren't bad, and there's quite literally nothing that you can do. Bad destroyer players will get spotted by Barbiano and die, right? Bad battleship players will get farmed down and die. Bad cruiser players will stay flat to the sap and get farmed down, and they will die. And the problem is that kind of like the instant the enemy has like a half of a clue on how to play the video game, you're almost irrelevant. I mean, almost irrelevant. You're incredibly dependent on the matchmaker. What kind of enemy ships are on the enemy team? Can you pen them? Because basically the thresholds that are important on Barbiano are the regular firing mode, pens 25, and the alternate firing mode, pens 32. Now, okay, you see here, we're talking about how the ship requires the enemy to be bad. Well, there is a sub approaching so close to the rock that his concealment advantage is totally nullified, and so we're going to open up. And yeah, in this situation, yeah, Barbiano, probably the best DD in the game, 100%. In a slugfest at close range against soft targets, yeah, I mean, it takes 10 seconds to kill a sub. And of course, if you know anything about how sub saturation works, killing a sub with guns on a DD in 10 seconds is like physically impossible in any other destroyer. But why did we kill that sub? Did we kill the sub because the Barbiano is some just unbelievable anti-sub killing machine? Or did we kill this sub because he like might be the worst sub player known to man? Well, it's probably the latter, right? It's probably the latter explanation. So undeniably, we kill him faster than any other DD in the game would. It's just that no DD, Barbiano or not, should ever get that kill. Because what the fuck is the sub doing, right? I mean, that's kind of the best way to summarize it, is we've really got to be fighting dogs for this ship to be good, right? Because there's kind of 2 kinds of targets, right? There's a target like Yodo, where I will pen him basically everywhere, right? He's made out of 25, so we can keep this disgusting full sap DPM, and at ranges of around 12 plus 11.5 kilometers, you get to shoot all of your guns. So we are pumping like no shit 700,000 DPM at this Yodo. Now, of course, the problem is the Yodo is not a giant pig of a battleship, so we're never going to hit him. So how do we make use of our monstrous DPM against something like a Yodo? Well, the answer, of course, is we need to be farming him at really close range, right? And the problem is we obviously could never do that when we play solo, because there's probably no universe where within 9 kilometers, 8 kilometers of a Yodo, also able to smoke, also with spotting. So we're just, spamming shells at this Columbo. Ooh, look at all the shells, look at all the shells. And now, there's something that we have to discuss when we talk about this ship against good versus bad players, right? I mean, we're getting, like, whoa, all of a sudden we got a bunch of good damage on that Columbo. Why? Because he's not moving at all, right? But I want you to think about, as we see this Star Wars level laser beams on display, what happens? Can anyone tell me what happens when the enemy battleships use a silly, goofy little skill known as improved repair party readiness? And the answer is Barbiano almost literally, sometimes we joke when we shoot at someone and get low damage that we healed them. Barbiano quite literally heals a large number of battleships when they are angled properly. It no shit heals battleships. Now, bad battleships can lose an obscene amount of health to Barbiano, a truly obscene amount of health. Good battleship players, however, Barbiano does really most of the time less damage than the average gunboat does, but it does less damage than the average gunboat while it farms IRPR. I mean, you've got to keep in mind, every minute I shoot at this Columbo, if he runs IRPR, I've taken a full 10 seconds off his heal, right? If I farm him for 2 minutes, I've basically given him an extra heal. And you see me switch to high pen mode there at the end because he's kiting and we're trying to land on his ass. Now, something that Barbiano does have going for a quote-unquote asset that may be worth discussing is you can you're kind of the only DD that can really get deck pens. And some rough math on the deck pens. Of course, your sap has pen angles, right? The lower the caliber sap, the worse the pen angles. For example, most battleship caliber sap has a, Wargaming calls it 70 to 80 degree angle, but it's a 10 to 20 degree angle, right? And that's a linear scale. So when your shells, your ricochet angles that you can see on, like, say, Ship Tool, other websites like that, those show the angles where you definitely will ricochet and where you definitely will not ricochet. Now, they scale linearly, so nice little torpedo. So when Barbiano says that at 11 kilometers, your shells impact at, I believe it's a 20 degree impact angle, right? And you have guaranteed angles that you will pen at 30 degrees, right? These are kind of like some of the British AP, you can kind of think of it that way, where it can have a chance, it has a 0% chance to ricochet at 30 degrees, and it has a 100% chance to ricochet at 15 degrees. So kind of the way the math works on Barbiano, sorry for the long ramble, is at 11 kilometers, you have about a 20 degree impact angle. At 12, you have about a 25 degree impact angle. And at 13, you have about a 30 degree impact angle. So at 13 kilometers, if you can pen the deck of the ship that you are spamming, basically all of your shells will give you full pen, and you are also shooting all of your guns at that range, and you have Diabolical DPM, right? And then at 12 kilometers, about 2/3 of your shells will deck pen, and at 11, about 1/3 will. That's kind of the rough math. 1/3, 2/3, and full, all of them. So it's pretty easy to keep in mind. So there are certain targets, and that's why I say the ship is very, very, very matchmaker dependent. There are some ships where, like, they literally can't play the game against this thing. Like, if you are in a Des Moines, a Golden Lion, think of these cruisers that typically play very bow in on islands. They're typically, they're not doing much other than going back and forth. Something like a bow in Des Moines, if you've got permanent spotting on it, and it's 13 kilometers away, you are honest to God sending 700,000 DPM into it, and you basically pen every shell. And this is what I mean, right? You see here, our Brisbane's close behind us, so we have perma spotting on Columbo, and you can see that at this range, we can aim at the superstructure, and it's obscene, right? I mean, it is grotesque. It's unbelievable the amount of damage this pumps into ships in this type of situation. The problem is, it's just really hard when you play this boat solo to find yourself in this kind of situation where you get to farm battleships at sub 10 kilometers and something is spotting for you, right? And that's the key. And I mean, our damage just rocketed up, right? I mean, half of a smoke, we farmed like 30k. You know, again, under ideal circumstances, very capable of farming like 50 plus thousand damage in a smoke. It's just that those ideal circumstances are very few and very far between. Um, you know, there's a lot of ships that are described as feast or famine, right? You know, often a ship like La Pampa is often described as feast or famine, right? There's definitely some truth to that. Um, the problem with Barbiano is, yes, it is a feast or famine boat, but it's mostly famine. You know, the enemy team just has good players, famine. The enemy team doesn't have many ships where either of your sap shells can pen everywhere, famine. It's a low DD count game, famine. It's a CV and sub game, famine. It's a game where your DDs play passive and you don't ever have spotting, it's a famine, right? It's mostly famine, and like as you can see from this replay and last replay, you get all of your damage in like these big chunky bursts, right? You pop a smoke, you've got perma spotting. It's a ship you either pen everywhere or like a Montana, a GK, right? These big superstructure BBs, and you're close. Or like you've somehow got a bow in Des Moines, a bow in Golden Lion, perma spotted, and you're raining down this, you're pissing sap from the sky, and just like watching watching the damage go up like the fucking national debt counter. And it's unbelievable. Like it's unbelievable. You know, as some of the Brits might say, makes you stick your lips out a bit. But like the situations when you play it solo, just very unlikely to happen, and it's a very passive ship. It's a deceptively passive ship. You have to play Barbiano with exceeding amounts of caution. And is that biasing my opinion of it? Yeah, I'll admit that it is. I hate playing cautious. I hate playing passive. I hate hiding, going, oh, well, I'm full health, but really it wouldn't be very prudent to shoot my guns right now because then I would lose a bunch of health. And then if I lost a bunch of health, maybe I can't have health later. And it's like, just let me shoot the guns, bro. Just let me get the fuck in there, buddy. That's how I like to play the game. So I hate this boat. I really can't sugarcoat it. I hate the fuck out of it. And let's hop back in the fort and go over its unique list of features. Okay, buddy. As far as equipment goes, I was gonna say this is just the build. However, I am going to deviate. What do I always say with most crawling smoke and fuel smoke boats? I always say that smoke gen mod is bait because losing dispersion means when you fight DDs, life sucks. I will say on Barbiano, I think you might want to take smoke gen mod. Because you piss out so many shells. I mean, you're on average shooting between 2 and 3 shells every, half a second? Something like that? I mean, you're shooting at close range, you're getting 12 shells with a 2.5-second reload, right? At long range, you're getting 16 shells with a 2.5-second reload. So, you shoot so many shells, the arcs are so bad, you can't even see where you're aiming because your sky is just red the whole way. This is kind of another sleeper feature I hate about Barbiano is, this might be a hot take, but salvo weight over DPM always and forever. But anyway, because you piss out so many shells and you can't really see where you're aiming at anyway, I actually think smoke gen mod on Barbiano makes a lot of sense. I haven't been running it much. I think I ran it for 2 games. It doesn't really feel like anything takes longer there's just so many shells landing everywhere. You don't even notice. And honestly, when you're shotgunning people at 13 km and going for deck pens, it might not even be the worst thing in the world that you're less accurate. I know that might sound like blasphemy, but realistically, if you've got a Bourgogne kiting at 12 kilometers, you almost might as well not be that accurate. It doesn't really matter, in my opinion. So, Smoke Gen mod could be a solid pick, for sure. You can see here the F key. It's a makes your DPM about 25% worse. And then, of course, when you use the alternate shells, um, you will pen 34, which is meaningless. You pen 32. That's what matters, right? It's just a straight pen. Now, funny enough, there's no delay. The shells just instantly change, which is very cool. The Italians really had some wicked tech back in the day. Just the build, definitely you want reload mod. And then on the captain, I think this is quite possibly just the build. Certainly these points are all the build. Now, it is potentially a little bit cope to run Grease the Gears. However, the turret traverse is a honest to god no shit pain point on this boat. Like, you would think these little single barrel AA gun turrets would turn like greased lightning. They have a dog shit turret traverse. Like, your default turret traverse is not great. It's surprisingly bad, and if you get surprised by a destroyer, like we're running reload mod and grease the gears, and we still have a 13-second 180 time, like you can actually get caught in this thing. Like, if your guns are the wrong way in Barbiano, there are a very large amount of destroyers that get to kill you because your guns are the wrong way. Like, I'm not kidding you. Ships like Druid, Alvaro de Bazan, Dare, anything with short burst smoke, like a Daring, a lot of destroyers, if they have a disengage ready and your guns are the wrong way, because remember, every DD basically spots you other than, like, no conceal Kaba. So if you get caught with your guns the wrong way, like, shit, just lose half your boat and don't fight back. Like, this thing is very, 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 very easy to outplay. So preventative maintenance, the thing is you don't have torps and you have 16 guns. So, like, do you give a shit if 1/16 of your DPM gets knocked offline? I don't know. I don't. I guess you could lose the engine more, but I take this because I need the smoke back as fast as possible. I take the turret. The turret traverse is probably a cope. Let's be for fucking real here. But I definitely think you almost like have to take superintendent on this thing, because any game that lasts like about 12 minutes, you run out of smoke. I mean, you could maybe... Now, here's the thing, is if you ran like smoke gen mod and you say change these 3 points into consumables enhancement, and now your smoke lasts for like 15 seconds longer per smoke, then maybe superintendent's not the most, not the best. Of course, you can always go like Giga Greed DPM and go Fearless Brawl. I do think you've got to take the range, even though it's in a weird spot, right? Because 13-7 is too much. And then when you get Sansonetti buff, you get like 15 km range. And 15 km in Barbiano is ludicrous. Like, you don't hit anything. The problem is, if you don't take range, then early game, you cannot deck pen people. Because at your base max range is like 11.5-ish. Don't quote me. And you only pen about a third of your shells on the deck. So, and you can't farm open water at all, really, at 11. You're going to get fisted. So, it's kind of in a weird spot, because, like, if you could start the game with Sansonetti buff, you probably wouldn't need this. But because you don't start the game with Sansonetti buff, it feels really bad to not have the range. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but that's just kind of the way it feels when you play the boat, in my opinion. Now, one thing that's funny about Barbiano is, yep, there we go. Confirmed, more maneuverable than Harugumo, God bless. It's like the size of a battleship turns better than Haru. Pretty cool. So it's actually not that bad in the turning. This is for a giant gunboat. It's not the worst, right? It's barely. It's a little bit worse than some of the bricky gunboats, but it's not terrible. But yeah, your max speed with the speed boost down is pretty appallingly bad for the size, right? Again, for the size of your boat. This speed on like a Daring, you never take a shell, right? This speed on Alvaro, you gobble shit. Even speed boost up, you gobble shit as long as you're within 10 km of people. 8 km is the best you can get. I think you do build for 8 km, because otherwise the ship would be like legitimately unplayable. You couldn't even avoid battleships. So you kind of have to run that. One thing that's really funny though is the turrets get armor. I guess this is an Italian thing, because Rigolo's similar. Like, Rigolo turrets are tanks. I haven't really looked at other DDs. Yeah, Paolo Emilio turrets are tanks. FR25 aren't, so there you go. But yeah, The turrets have like crazy armor for how small they are. So you like almost never lose turrets in this thing. It's really weird. And of course, if you do lose turrets in this thing, like you have 12 on a broadside, 16 on a long range broadside. So like it doesn't even matter that the DPM goes offline. But you know the ship is absolutely fucking gigantic, right? It's the easiest destroyer probably in the game to hit. It's easier to hit than Elbing, but doesn't have Elbing's armor, right? So kind of what ends up happening is it's all fun and games until you run into a competent destroyer player. And the problem in Barbiano when you run into a competent destroyer player is that two things happen. The first is he's going to go bow in, and your DPM, instead of being around 450, because remember at close range you can only shoot 12 guns max, which is 2/3 of your firepower, 3/4, sorry, of your firepower, which is about 450 SAP DPM, which sounds really good. The problem is when those ships go bow into you, your 450 SAP DPM feels more like Shima HE DPM because it basically is closer to Shima HE DPM. And so you don't really do much damage. Now you can obviously shoot his guns so he doesn't damage you, but you're not going to damage him. Now, that's assuming, okay, that you're showing enough broadside to get 12 guns in the fight, which is about 40 degrees-ish. You got to show a lot of angle. Now, what's going to happen when you try to get all your guns in the fight, 1v1, let's say a daring, right? A ship that's got some decent guns, but, you know, no one's shaking and shitting and pissing their pants because daring's hunting them, right? I mean, it's like, it's got good DPM, but it's not like the world destroyer. Well, the problem is a good daring against your Barbiano is kind of a world destroyer because do you go bow in and he has like triple your DPM? Like objectively, he's got triple your DPM, and then you just try to break his guns so at least he can't fist you back. Or do you try to get enough DPM in the fight to compensate for the fact that your sap can really only pen his guns in superstructure, but then you get elbow deep shafted by the daring? And this is what I mean when this boat just really needs bad players. Like, it really, really, really needs the enemies to be bad. I mean, like you saw, you know, we were spotted for 10 years, right? The Halford's somehow flat, so we, like, take his whole boat, right? The next game, the sub is, like, just on the surface, 3 kilometers from a rock, totally nullifying his spotting advantage over our whole team, and we kill him in 10 seconds. Like, those are the kind of players where Barbiano is insane against. And then, like I said, you fight fight a decent Yu Yang in this thing. Fight a Yu Yang who goes bow into your Barbiano, and tell me how that goes for you. Like, you won't die to him, but like you're gonna lose a shit ton of HP, and it's gonna feel really goddamn bad. You're like, this thing has 200,000 DPM, and I have 2.5 times that, and you're getting out traded. Like, the only reason you even win those fights is if you start at full HP. But like, the boat is gigantic. I mean, I can't stress enough how easy this boat is to hit. Any good destroyer player with 2 turrets in the front is gonna outdamage Barbiano 1v1. It's gonna fucking happen. Yu Yang, gearing, daring, God help you if it's like a druid, like, all you can do is break the guns so you get away with less HP lost. And then if they go flat to you, you kill them faster than like almost any ship in the game. Other than like reload boosting Austin and Minotaur. Like, those are the only 2 ships that kill DDs faster than this thing. So you have to fight against bad enemies. You need bad enemies. You need a semi-competent team. And like, those 2 things don't happen enough for me to recommend this ship. I mean, if you play a lot in a division, it can be silly. Like, it can be silly. The thing is, though, this might sound crazy, it's not even a good support destroyer. And it's not even a good support destroyer because it has bad shell arts. Best support destroyers in the game are ships like Rigolo, Alvaro, Druid, Kleber, right? Why are these ships god tier support destroyers? Well, it's because they have railguns, right? They have railguns. So if they've got 6.5 to 8 km detect, it doesn't really matter because when their screening destroyer spots an enemy destroyer 8.5 from them, they slam it. Barbiano doesn't really do that. Like, realistically, if you're shooting a DD who's, if a Shima's coming in and your Shima spots him and their Shima insta-kites out and you open up in Barbiano at 9, you're not that good at doing a ton of damage, right? Because the shell arcs aren't very good. So it's not even a great support destroyer. The reason why I say it's great in a div with another destroyer is that you just have the spotting, right? You just have the perma spotting and you get to play the game, right? When this thing has permanent spotting and it gets to rip one of these smokes every minute and a half and it gets to farm at a close enough range to hit all of its shells, it's diabolical. It really is. I mean, it's the height. It's the height of cancer. I'm showing solo games back to back because I always do that. I think it's the most realistic. But like the thing with Barbiano, and this is actually similar to La Pampa. And listen, I will always take an underpowered destroyer or a balanced destroyer over a broken one, right? But what Barbiano is balanced around is the 10% of the games that are feasts, right? Barbiano has the theoretic ability to, like, kill a full health battleship in 1 minute. Like, it legitimately has that potential. Like, if you go around a rock on, like, if you've got, like, a bow-in Jean Bar at 13 kilometers, you could conceivably kill it in 30 seconds. Like, let's say a Jean Bar is like beached, he's stuck on a rock, and you are 13 km and you have permanent spotting, and you load the F key ammo, you get all deck pens, you have 700, with the F key you have like 500 something thousand DPM that pens him everywhere. That Jean Bar could conceivably die in well under a minute, right? Or you've got like a flat broadside Wooster who can't spot you back, and your regular ammo, right? 25 mil plated cruisers, like your regular ammo pens them everywhere. And you have like 600,000 DPM with some AR kicking in, even with only 12 guns shooting, and you can kill a cruiser in like 20 seconds. Like, that's ridiculous. So the boat is balanced because it can do that. And because it can do that, it's really, really bad most of the time, if that makes sense. And, I guess on the one hand, good on wargaming, because this boat is definitely not overpowered. But the problem with Barbiano, the reason why I hate it from a game design perspective, is it's toxic. It's so fucking toxic, man. Like, when you're in a fucking Preußen, these guys in their GK just trying to get away, right? You're trying to get away, and like this thing has permanent spotting because it's divved with a Shima or some shit like that. And it's just like literally just a beam of shells that never ends. It's so toxic. It's not really like doing anything unique. I mean, realistically, like a full concealed Khabarovsk is a better destroyer, right? Like even gunboats with horrific detect, most of them are like Khabarovsk is better than Barbiano, like straight up. Delny is probably better than Barbiano, right? These ships are probably legitimately as good or better than Barbiano. I mean, Kaba for sure. Ships like Hull, Ragnar, Elbing, they're way better ships. If you want to farm damage in a DD, a gun-focused DD that just exists almost purely to farm damage, like, it's not very good compared to those. But you can, every now and then, get in an incredibly silly situation where all the stars align, and I mean, like, just aim in superstructure, you like rip 80k off a battleship with one fuel smoke, and it's so dumb and it's super toxic and it's really fun and it's really silly. But most of the time when you play solo, you are sailing around cursing your team for never spotting, cursing the matchmaker for giving you a carrier, because when you're out of smoke, you're probably the single easiest destroyer in the game to fuck over. This was an AA platform, by the way, guys, historically. designed for anti-air. Yeah, AA sucks on it. God bless. So it's a silly, goofy boat. Um, it is very good when you've got perma spotting. Dived with a stealthy DD, it's pretty good, but not as a support destroyer. Just as a farmer that finally gets to farm, it's great when div with a support DD. If you're a solo randoms player, like, this is the last destroyer you ever get for steel. Like, one of the last ships, I think, period, you would ever want for steel. It really doesn't have hardly any game impact. And there are other ships that you could argue are true of that. Like, say Hull is like a zero game impact ship. It just farms, right? This just farms. But Hull is not frustrating to play. Hull is very relaxing to play, very enjoyable to play, very chill. Barbiano is like a Hull for people with locked in syndrome. I mean, it's just AIDS. It griefs you, the player. It griefs them, the enemy, and it griefs everyone. It's very unique. Like, you grief the guy you're pissing 700k sap DPM at. You grief your team because they are totally down a destroyer, not even a torpedo threat destroyer, a ship that can't even get a point of damage without having spotting for it. And you're griefing yourself most of the time too, because boy, does it suck. Most of the time in randoms, it just sucks to play. So there you go. That's the Barbiano review. Super hot, strong endorsement of the ship, I know. As always, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.